I moved to Bangkok in 2010. I'd been visiting for a very long time and I loved everything about the city, and I was retired at 55 years of age. I didn't have a lot of money, but I had enough invested that gave me an income that, based on my previous times in Thailand, more specifically Bangkok, would give me the sort of life that I would want for nothing. I wasn't one of those guys who liked to spend lavishly, eat out at the most expensive restaurants, or go to the bars. I just liked Thailand for what it was able to offer me at that stage of my life. My attraction to Bangkok was because I'm a city person. Deep down, I always have been. I worked most of my life in London, although originally I was from Ireland. I wish I was one of those sorts of people who made a lot of money, had their own place, but that was just not me. I seemed to be content with the basics in life, renting an okay place, and just getting by the best I could. I loved the hustle and bustle of big cities. I think that's what I'm trying to say. And I felt like I fit right into Bangkok when I went there first around the year 2000. I went 3 more times up until the year 2010. Each time I liked it just as much as the last, and each time I tried to go to different places other than Bangkok. While I loved lots of the places in Thailand, Bangkok was always the place that I preferred, and that's why I chose to move there in 2010. My income, and I will say in dollars to make it easier for you, was approximately $1,700 every month. In 2010, that was more than enough to be able to afford me the lifestyle that I wanted. After paying for my rent, my health insurance, my visa essentials, that was enough left to be able to live life. Not fancy, not lavishly like I said, but just enough to be able to live the way I wanted. My investments paid me this income, and it wasn't like my investments were ever going to increase in value. I just had what I had and that was it. So while I hoped to be able to maintain the lifestyle that I was interested in, that was when I moved in 2010, I did have slight reservations that perhaps things would move away from me. 2010 was the best year of my life. I'd waited for something like that for as long as I could remember. The feeling of freedom, the feeling of being in control of my own destiny and not having to answer to anyone. It really is a special feeling, and I was very grateful that I was able to live that. I rented a great, albeit small, 1-bedroom unit in Chiang Mai, got myself a retirement visa, and started what I hoped would be my forever life. I had been divorced back in the UK, but that was from many decades ago. I got married in my early 20s, and that only lasted for 3 years. And after that, I kind of just went from casual relationship to slightly more serious relationship, with other things in between. I never really found my soulmate, and I must stress that it was never my intention to look for anybody in Thailand or to have a serious relationship in Thailand. While you should never say never, that wasn't what I was there for. I was just there to enjoy myself, and I also did hope that I might be able to find something to do in my free time that could turn into a hobby, and perhaps a hobby that could turn into something more. What I'm trying to say is that I wasn't going with any firm plans. That's the thing. Just take things as they came and enjoy it, because at the end of the day, you only really have one chance to enjoy life, don't you? And that's what I was there for. Throughout the whole of 2010, it was everything I wanted it to be. I started making a few friends with other expats in similar positions to me. I found things that I was interested to do that didn't cost a lot of money, and I went out to certain restaurants that I found fit within my budget. I spent most of my time around the area where I rented. From time to time, I did go into the thick of it around Asok and Prompong, and I'd treat myself to a Western-style meal from time to time. I was lucky that I really loved Thai food, and I still do. I picked it up straight away, and I was always the one in my friend group of expats who preferred Thai, while most of the other guys preferred food from where they came from. I lived that life, and it was everything I wanted it to be throughout 2010, 2011, 2012, but by the time 2013 rolled around, I am noticing slight changes around certain parts of Bangkok where I go to treat myself in terms of a nice meal or going out for a drink. I did have one girlfriend during that time, which lasted for about 6 months, but it wasn't really an ideal match. We went our separate ways and she was a similar age to me, still working an office job in Bangkok, and it wasn't anything like many of the relationships that you hear about. But one thing that I noticed happening a lot was I would go into many restaurants now, and more of them started adding things to the menu. The 10% service charge and the 7% VAT. This wasn't very common when I was going to Thailand originally for holidays. And when you start seeing this on the menus on top of something that's already quite a lot more expensive than it used to be, that's when I'm starting to find that my budget doesn't stretch anywhere near as far as it used to do. Of course, this isn't common for all places in Thailand or in Thai-style restaurants in local areas, but every week I find I'm spending 20 to 30% more than I was in 2010. This is just for my treat meal. That leads me to conclude that Bangkok is only going to continue to get more expensive throughout time. I was expecting that anyway, but it seemed to be quite a sudden shift. Old places closed down, new places opened up, and it didn't turn things into what they were before. The new places that would open up would replace your favourite place, and their menu was 50% more expensive. Then they've got these extra charges on top, so that it means that my $1,700 a month budget, I simply can't afford to do what I could only 3 years prior. Throughout 2013, I'm noticing this more and more, and because of that, I started to conclude that I needed to make a change. As much as I loved Bangkok, my budget was my budget, and my income was my income, and it's not going to change. If I don't make any more money to add to my income, then I'm going to have to reduce the quality of my life. I had my money in investments which gave me this income, so I had that available to me, but that was meant to be for the income. It was my plan when I got to around 70 years old or 75 years old that I could start eating into that, because you get to a point where you could spend a certain amount of money and you're never going to run out. I was a long way from there, but that's when I decided to start going around Thailand and looking for a plan B. I'd been to many places in Thailand other than Bangkok, and I liked them. Chiang Mai was my favourite. Phuket was okay, but I didn't really like Pattaya. It just wasn't my cup of tea. Of course, I'm going to different places. I need to make sure that stays within budget. I spent 3 months checking out lots of different places, and I eventually came to the decision that I would move to Chiang Mai because my budget would stretch so much further there than it would in Bangkok. The type of restaurants that I would go to for a treat now and then were a lot cheaper already, plus they didn't have these additions to the menu. I know I've talked about those additions, the 10% service charge and 7% VAT, but I really dislike that. Just put the price on the menu what it is, so you can look and see if you want to go inside. There's nothing worse than the price not being the price, and in Chiang Mai it didn't seem like that, at least in very many places at all. So it was settled. Halfway through 2023, I gave up my place in Bangkok and I moved up north to Chiang Mai. I rented somewhere within walking distance of many places in the city, and that was 30% cheaper than I was paying for a much smaller place in Bangkok. And I started getting into different friend groups, learning about the expats there, and taking up different hobbies to occupy my time. I immediately find that my budget goes so much further there, and I'm not spending even my allocated allowance some months, but I'm having a much better time than I was in Bangkok. I did miss the hustle and bustle. I missed some of the things that simply weren't available in Chiang Mai, but overall, it was a very good decision. It would actually turn out to be the decision that would see me meeting someone, which in turn would see me completely losing my mind. I want to be upfront and say it's not easy to talk about. Part of me wants to blame Bangkok for changing so much so quickly when I moved. It's one thing to hear someone talking about how much you need to live in Bangkok, but I lived it, and I watched it move so much further away from me in such a short amount of time. Chiang Mai was different, even today, at least the last time I was there. Chiang Mai was so much more affordable than Bangkok, and it gave you such a better quality of life. It didn't take me long to settle into life there. It was quieter, more laid back, and I quickly adjusted to the new pace of life. Up until this point, I'd only had that one short relationship in Thailand, and that was with a woman who was my age. I never expected that I'd fall for someone again. I was open to it, like I said, but it wasn't an expectation. It wasn't even a want or a desire. I especially never thought I would have met someone who was younger than me, because that was something that I never thought about. I know many people think about Thailand, and you think old guy, young woman. That wasn't what Thailand was for me. I was happy with everything else that Thailand had. But one day, I was walking up the Monk's Trail. If you know Chiang Mai, the start of that trail is just behind the Chiang Mai University, and you walk up this dirt track up quite a steep hill, and you get to some kind of temple sanctuary. You continue a bit further up and you get to the big main road, and that swings around all the way up to Doi Suthep. And it was something that I enjoyed doing for exercise at least 2 or 3 times a week. This particular time was like every other time before. I had a bicycle which I rode to the entranceway. I padlocked that to the little sign that indicated that you weren't allowed to bring motorcycles up the hill, and I just set off on the way with my backpack and a few bottles of water inside. It was like I did it every other time before. That's what makes it so difficult. But halfway up, I'm approaching a woman who is walking in the same direction as I was. I was walking a little bit faster. I was in shape, very healthy and fit for my age, always active, and I guess I looked younger than I was. I still had a full head of hair. I didn't really drink that often, and I never smoked. So the fact that I was catching up to her wasn't unusual for me, because I usually did catch up to people. I just walked past and didn't say anything at all. I gave a little glance to the side, ever so briefly, and noticed that she seemed to be listening to music and in her old world, walking up. And then I just continued, but took a little side turn to look at the view of the big rock. You'll know what I'm talking about if you've been. If you've never been, then picture a big rock with a little bit of a view of a city. I sat down, took out my water, and spent 5 minutes there and set off again. And as I was walking up, I noticed that she was in the distance again. But on the ground, I noticed a pair of headphones that seemed to have been recently dropped. I glanced up and noticed she wasn't listening to music anymore. So I put 2 and 2 together, grabbed them, and went off after her to give them back. As I approached, I said, "Excuse me," and she turned round and I said, "I think you've dropped your headphones." She then frantically started patting her pockets to see if she had lost them, and they were hers. So she thanked me in reasonable English and made a light remark as if to say, "I can't believe I dropped them." I was just about to continue up, and then she said, "What's your name?" I responded, as you do, asked her what her name was, and we just started kind of walking up together, continuing up a mountain. Something like that wasn't so unusual. I'd run into people walking many places before, and you often find yourself talking and continuing together. But she seemed to be more keen to talk than many people usually are. I'm not sure what it was about her, but I was more than happy to be in a conversation with her. The sort of things we talked about. I said I was living in Chiang Mai and I'd been in Thailand for 4 years and retired. I liked to keep myself fit and active, and she said she was from a small village in Isaan, and she worked at a restaurant in Chiang Mai, that's what she said. I didn't ask for her age then, or she didn't ask for mine. It was really an interesting conversation though, weird at the same time. When we got to the temple, she asked if I could take a picture of her, which I did, and then she said that was her first time walking there. She said she'd just come out of a relationship with someone, and that person was from America, and she wanted to clear her head. I get it, if a Thai woman says they've just come out of a relationship with another foreigner, that could send your mind to a few different places. But it could tell you that she was opening up because she was in that moment of being in this place. It is such an incredible place, and once you get up there, there's a view of the city like nothing you've ever seen before. It's slightly cooler, and she was telling me all these things about her, and I'm just listening and thinking, what a great person. I was going to continue walking up further, and tried to get myself all the way up to Doi Suthep. I asked her if she wanted to join me, and she just said no way, she was too tired. But she said, "Why don't you come and have a coffee at the bottom with me?" I didn't see any harm in that, so we walked down together. And she had a motorcycle parked up. I had my bicycle parked up, and we picked a cafe that we both knew and said we'd meet there in an hour. That's how the relationship began. I was happy that I was speaking with someone, but she seemed to be the one who was pushing things to try to get even more out of it, for example, another date sometime. I was very interested to continue with this, but it seemed like she was the one doing all the instigating. But that first date, I suppose you could call it, in that cafe, that's when we started learning little bits about each other. I found out that she was 32, and she told me which restaurant she worked in. She said it was very close to Loy Krot Road in Chiang Mai, and I knew that was the area where there were lots of bars, but at the time I didn't put two and two together and think she was actually worked there. That would never have entered my mind because I wasn't someone who went to the bars at all. I asked her when she was working again, and she said tomorrow. This was her only day off, and she started working there a month ago. It seemed that she was working there for a month then, so I guess when her relationship broke down, and that's why she went to work. I just thought she meant she worked in a restaurant, and I never thought that it meant anything else. But we talked and spoke with each other, and it felt like there was some connection there. Although the connection there wasn't anything serious and I wasn't thinking about anything else, it was her who said, "Would you like to go out this evening for dinner and a few drinks?" I wasn't doing anything else, so I didn't see any harm in that, so I agreed. I gave her my line ID and left, thinking what an interesting few hours I had just had, and how completely unexpected they were. That evening we met up at a northern Thai-style restaurant right in the heart of the old city. I was the one who picked it, and of course, I was the one who was paying, I knew that, and we had a great meal and drinks. We just talked with each other, and more drinks, and that makes you a lot looser than you would otherwise be. And after the meal, we went to a bar not too far away for some more drinks. The next thing I know, I'm waking up in the morning and I'm wondering how had I had such an experience. I just thought about it in the moment and thought that from time to time you do have these strange yet wonderful experiences. But I also felt like I wanted to see her again. She was there, sitting on the sofa in my room, smiling, and said, "Well, I've got to go to work soon." And all I could think to say was, "Well, can I see you after work?" She said that she works really late usually, so that would be difficult. And I should have thought what that could have meant, but I didn't. And I said, "Well, can you take another day off?" I'd expected her to say no because I've got a job and I must do it. But she said, "Of course I can take another day off." Again, that should have been a warning as to what she did. But I was happy enough in the moment and she left not long after. And that day I just tried to get on with what I already had planned. I was just going to ride my bike up Doi Suthep for a bit of exercise, and after that I didn't really have any plans. So I went about my day like I normally would, and I met her that evening. We had a repeat of the previous night, and then I just feel like feelings I'd never felt before. The thought of not seeing her again scared me, and that's the honest fact. And I saw her again for a few nights in a row when she kept saying that she was able to take more time off work without any problem whatsoever. After a week of seeing her, I was really enjoying myself, and she seemed to be really happy. I really liked her and wanted to get to know her even more. But it was after, I don't know how long, quite a few days of seeing each other every evening, that she said she had something to tell me. I didn't know what it was going to be, so I just said, "Say whatever you want." She said, "I hope you don't mind, but I don't work in a restaurant, I work in a bar." That was meant to be the chance for me to understand what she meant and escape. But she said, "I work in a bar on Loy Krot Road." She said she started working there after her relationship broke down, and that's where she worked when she got into that relationship with the guy from America. She said she didn't want to tell me because we didn't meet there, and she wanted me to think that she was just a normal girl. And although I would never have gone into a bar, I was never interested in anything to do with that. The fact that I'd never seen her in that life, I kind of thought, well, never mind. I told her not to worry about it, but the problem was I liked her. And if I wasn't seeing her, she'd be working in the bar, and that's what I had to say to her. It's one thing to work in a bar, but you want to go on dates with me and I'm not interested in bars. You can't work in a bar and see me at the same time because that won't work. I don't care if that's what you did, but I can't see you for dates and then you work in the bar when you're not seeing me. It just doesn't work. She said she understood and said, well, what would we could do about it? How about living together, she said. Against everything that I'd always told myself, I said, let's try it for a week and see how it goes. I thought a week would be a good amount of time just to check things out. I hadn't lived with anyone for a very long time, so I was quite excited to be in that moment. I knew I shouldn't have done. I knew what I was doing I shouldn't be doing, but I did it anyway, and I didn't care at the time that she did move into my place, and she was with me for that whole week, and every day just got better and better. If I pinpoint any moment in my life where things just went wrong for me, that was it. That was where everything started to go wrong because I fell in love with someone. I stopped putting myself first for the first time in years, and I completely ignored the fact that she worked in a bar when I met her, that she lied to me when we met originally, and that by doing that I was doing what I was doing because feelings were garnered for her before I knew what she did. I might not have been able to think rationally from that point. I always prided myself on being a rational individual, but this was far from that. And I find myself in a position where I have a girlfriend who is the only thing that seems to matter to me anymore. I've not given her any money at this point. I'm not giving her any support. I'm just taking care of her when she's with me, and I pay when we go out. I pay for the room and the electric and everything like that, of course. But if I look back, I think that it was her who really tried her best to get into this relationship with me. It was as if that's what she was trying to do above all else. That's the only thing that mattered to her. And while I felt like we were both in love with each other, I don't know if she actually loved me or she just liked me and thought that I could be a ticket for her to have a better life. I did find out very early on that she had a kid who was 13 years old. She didn't talk much about him, but after she'd been with me for a month, that was the first time it became clear that she wanted me to help take care of him. He was with the family, living in Isaan, and that started out as being a little bit of money here and there, became a monthly allowance for her of 10,000 baht. I moved from Bangkok to Chiang Mai so I could stay within budget, but now she's taking up a lot of my budget. But I'm going along with it because I'm happy in the moment and I'm not thinking anything about it. I'd say we lived together for a whole year, up until 2014, halfway through the year or thereabouts, and it feels like we've lived together forever. I would say that I loved her, and I would at the time at least thought that she loved me, and it was her who kept talking about the possibility of getting married. That was something I'd never thought about, but I was so trapped in the moment, so stuck in this idea that what I was doing was special and unique given the way we met, that I would be foolish not to take things to the next level. So we just decided to get married. It wasn't anything romantic or anything like that, just talking one day and, oh, okay, fine. When that was decided, of course, I had to go and have the ceremony in Isaan, which I was okay to do. And when we were there, all her family seemed great. I met her child and he was pleasant enough, and she introduced me to a side of Thailand that I'd never been before. I'd never considered that part of Thailand. I'd heard of it, I'd heard a few stories about it, but it felt like a side of Thailand I could get to know more. When we got married, I didn't have to give any money or anything to anyone. It was nothing about me losing any money. The ceremony itself, I think, cost only 20,000 baht. We did it very simply, very easily, and it wasn't one of these big affairs where people have hundreds of people coming around from the village. I liked it that way, and she seemed to be okay with it. And after we were married, that was great. That's as far as we went. We didn't do anything officially because we felt like we didn't need to. At least I felt like we didn't need to. I didn't know if we should have done, and I didn't see the point. I had my retirement visa, so it wasn't like I needed a different visa, and we did things in the village way, and that was good enough for her, and I was happy with that too. One of the biggest problems was just how much I started to love her the more and more as time went on. Every day was more. The fact that we got married didn't make me love her more, but it was just like things we did together, the places we went, the way she looked at me and talked and smiled. Everything about her completely drew me in and absorbed me into something that I never experienced before. While I did have that relationship when I was very young, it wasn't anything like this one. It was more like that was just expected of me. That was what I was meant to do. But this is what I wanted to do. And because of that, I suppose, I really let my guard down because I would never have thought that someone that I loved so much could have ever turned into something that I didn't like. Thinking about harming her would be the last thing I would have ever done. I would have hated to think about anything bad happening to her, especially because of me, and I thought the roles would be reversed. We went back to Chiang Mai after that, and we started talking about the village and where she was from all the time. When the idea of living there came up, instead of me brushing it off and saying no way, I started thinking perhaps this could be something I would be interested in doing. I was getting older every year, as you do. I was going to be 60 in just under a year's time, so it did seem like it could be something to enjoy in my latter years. I know the extremes from Bangkok to Chiang Mai to village life is just that, a huge extreme. A lover of cities went to a quieter city and then starts thinking about living in a small village in the middle of nowhere. It was more the idea of making her happy and doing something that she wanted to do. The thought of that happening made me happy, and if that meant living in a village, I wanted to live in a village. We talked about it for a few months, not every single day, but most days we'd talk about what we could do, things we could do in our spare time, new hobbies we could have, things we could see and do. But up until this point, I just thought we would be renting somewhere. When one day I asked what are the places like that we could rent, she said it's very difficult to rent somewhere and we'd probably need to build our own place. That was the first time that was brought up, but initially I thought that was something that sounded scary and something like I would never do. But when she starts talking about how much cheaper it is to live there, if we're spending $1,700 a month in Chiang Mai, in the village we could spend half of that and have a similar experience. When she starts talking about that, then I start thinking about, well, if that really is possible, what will be the problem of taking half of my investments and using that for the house, get a car, because it will be inconvenient otherwise, and then my investments are paying for my income and living expenses that I need for the village. As long as the visa is covered, health insurance is covered, there wouldn't be any rent to pay, so that will be cheaper. Everything seemed to add up and make perfect sense. It wasn't like I agreed straight away. I thought about it and we talked about it some more, and probably 3 months of thinking about it was the point when I hadn't even agreed yet. But I did say let's go and have a look and see what things would be like. That seemed to be the first step we needed to take. Let's go and have a look and spend a bit of time in one of those small resorts that they have and get a first-hand experience of what it's actually like spending more than a few days there. We left Chiang Mai. I kept my place on because I wasn't going to give that up yet, but we did plan to spend a whole month in the village. Well, we'd actually be spending our time about 5 minutes away from the village where the closest resort was. If you've been to places like that, you know what I mean. They're like small bungalow rooms, just one very small room with an adjoining bathroom. But it was all you needed. Air conditioning, they were reasonably comfortable and that was great. Very hard mattresses though, and the pillows were awful, so I remember taking my own pillow, so I was not going to be uncomfortable. But when we arrived, it was a very long bus journey from Chiang Mai, we borrowed the family's motorcycle and just started to take it all in. What would it be like to live there? Would it be something I could do? And early on I thought that definitely it could be. When she was there, she always seemed to be happy. She was always speaking the local dialect, which was different from how they spoke in Chiang Mai. Similar to the Lao language, they had different words for certain things. In Thailand, for example, in Thai language, if something tastes good, you say aroy. But if you went to that area, they would say sep instead. It was interesting, and I was trying to pick up Thai, but it seemed to be in that area, while they still spoke Thai, if they were speaking amongst themselves, they would use a local dialect. That month flew by a lot quicker than I expected, and at the end of it, I had pretty much made up my mind that I would love to live there. We'd been to look around at what similar houses looked like that we could have within the budget and that we could afford. We looked at all kinds of things, and when we got back to Chiang Mai, it was one of those, let's just do it. I was excited, newly invigorated, with something different to think about, and I couldn't wait to arrive in my 60s in a very different place than I'd ever thought I'd be in. If I think how quickly my feelings for her took hold and how she seemed to mould what she wanted so well, it's quite unnerving to think about it. I'm not sure if that was her idea right from the start, but I found myself getting so lost in the moment that the idea of not building a house and going to live with her actually started to not make sense. I felt like I would be losing out of a great retirement if I didn't go there. There were no concerns or worries that this was a bad thing. or that I was setting myself up for a huge loss. It just seemed like it was a stepping stone in the right direction to a completely different retirement. But not only that, in order to be able to do something that seemed and felt so real and exciting at the same time. I remember when I gave up that rented place in Chiang Mai. Before that, we did go and purchase a car. That was the first time I took out half of my investments, transferred it all in cash and sent it to my bank account in Thailand. Around 7 million baht landed in the account, and I never had that amount of cash all at once. I think it gave me a false sense of security, because when you see that amount of money in your bank and think about all the things that you could buy, this was around $200,000, then you loosen up a bit and start to spend a little bit more freely than you would have spent before. I spent 1.5 million on a car. That was nearly $40,000. I don't know why I spent that much, but I bought a big 4-wheel drive Toyota Fortuner. I just felt like I could afford it with the money I had. We could have spent a third of that and had something that was just as acceptable. Granted, it wouldn't have been as big or comfortable or as showy as the Fortuner, and I wasn't even picking up on the fact that for her having something like that seemed to mean the world to her. As soon as we got that car, even before we left Chiang Mai, she would use it regularly. She would drive to the place close to where she would work and drive down the road. We hadn't had the windows tinted yet, and it was as if she wanted people to see her in the car. It was as if her being in that car meant so much to her that she was able to have it, and nothing else seemed to make sense. At the same time, I didn't think anything of it, and I should have thought something of it and picked up on these little things, because I should have done. I really should have done. I packed up the few things I had, filled the car with everything, including my bicycle, which I couldn't wait to start riding around my new home. And we set off, leaving Chiang Mai for good to her village in Isaan. It was quite a long drive, approximately 12 hours or so, but we did arrive and checked into the same resort we stayed at for the month when we were there. We were planning to stay there for as long as it took. It could be as much as a year if needs be. We needed to make sure everything was just right. We weren't going to rush into buying land or rush into finding a builder to do the work for us. We wanted to make sure everything was done properly and within the budget that we had. Paying for that every month and her allowance, the money was going down slowly. Although I still had an income coming in, it was about half of what it was before. We spent 3 months looking for a plot of land that met the requirements for both of us. She seemed to have a lot of requirements for land. She wanted a bit of space at the back where she could grow things, maybe enough room for a small fish pond. She had lots of grand visions as to what the place was going to look like. I was really only interested in having a place that was peaceful and quiet. I didn't really want anything that would be too close to anyone else's house, and I wanted to make sure that all the utilities were already available and in place, so we didn't need to pay to extend anything. When we talked about the land originally, I expected to pay about 300,000 baht, so just under $10,000 for what we needed. But after those 3 months were up, and we found some land that was around 1 million baht, $30,000 or thereabouts, it felt like it was way too expensive for the budget, but I just didn't think about it and decided to buy it anyway. It was a reasonable sized plot, and the reason that I spent that amount of money was just to make her happy. I didn't reason with myself that I should have looked for something a bit cheaper. After the car and the land, there was still going to be 4 million baht left, and we did find out though, or I did find out, that we needed to raise a portion of the land where the house was going to be, and that meant that was going to cost about 500,000 baht to do that. I had no idea it was going to cost that much. When it came to things like raising the land, I didn't think to check how much it was going to cost. I just thought getting a few trucks to deliver the dirt and pour it on and start packing it down, it didn't seem like something that should cost a lot of money. She said it's not going to cost a lot of money, and because she was from there and seen it before, I believed her. So that was a huge amount of money extra. It also meant we needed to wait quite a number of months before we were ready to even build on it. And by the time we could start building, money had gone down even more. But there still seemed to be so much available for the house with a bit left over that I wasn't really overly concerned. When the time came to finally start building, we'd already found someone to build it for us. We'd been into the local city to a professional builder where they had different designs of houses that you could pick one off the shelf, and you knew exactly what it was going to cost and what it would look like. I thought that was the best idea. Although you might be paying slightly more, you knew how much you're paying up front and what it's going to look like, and you can look at examples of houses that they've built. So it made sense to me. We settled on a design that was 3 million baht, and that included basic fixtures and fittings like tiles and paint, but we would need to add everything else and our own finishing touches when it was ready. It only took 4 months to build, which wasn't a long time at all, I didn't think, and it was coming along well, and I was paying in installments, and it was ready after those 4 months. They had so many people working there, you could tell they'd done it before and they were good at it, so I wasn't worried that the construction was going to be bad. When it was ready, there was about 400,000 baht in the bank, and I thought that would be more than enough for the air conditioning units, the kitchen, the bathroom, and the furniture that we would want. I was quickly taken aback by how much things cost in Thailand in terms of things like that. When my wife spoke about the things that we would need and how much they would cost, she said sure we could get everything far less than 400,000 and it would be all we needed. This was around $11,000 give or take. I was confident that she knew what she was talking about and we would be able to do this. And when we started to go looking around at things to put in the house, from the bathroom to the sofa to the kitchen for example, while what she said wasn't exactly false, what she was talking about was extremely bad quality things that you wouldn't want in your house. For example, a very, very cheap 500 baht shower head made of cheap plastic, a sofa that was made out of plastic for 6,000 baht, a TV from a brand I've never heard of before that was tiny for 3,000 baht. I was looking at these items thinking, there's no way I would ever want to use anything like this. Then you start to look at things that you would have in your own country and realise that they're pretty much the same price as you would pay for them in your own country. So what should have been 400,000 baht spend to get the house up to speed, turned out was going to be a 1.2 million baht spend. This was for everything, for the kitchen, the bathroom, furniture, everything. It was everything we needed. I wanted a proper kitchen, and this 1.2 million baht was still a low budget for everything in the whole house. That meant I had to take some of my investments yet again to cover the deficit, but it was a sacrifice that I thought would be worth it. When all was said and done, my investments were paying me approximately $800 a month in income. I wasn't overly concerned. It felt like because I didn't have to pay rent, which was $300 a month, that was like an $1,100 a month income instead of a $1,700 a month income. We were living in the village where things were more affordable, and we had a fantastic house to live in instead of a small one-bedroom condo. It put me close to the wire though, I will admit to that, and I was a bit concerned about it. I was already 60 years old, but I didn't feel it. I was still very active and did a lot of exercise, but I was getting older, and I told myself it made sense, at least at the time, to have our own place when I grew old. Moving in was a lot of fun. It was weird at the same time because I never lived in such a fantastic house before. I always stayed in small, cheap places, but this was palatial in comparison. I settled into life then, found new routes to go on my bicycle, and in the early stages things were everything I thought they'd be. My wife is very happy to be there. As I mentioned before, this is just a village ceremony, so we weren't married on paper, and while I could go around on my bicycle, she might take the car, and although we had the windows tinted now, she would often lower the windows when she drove around the area, as if to say, I'm back and I've got a car. At the time, I didn't say anything about it, but over the few months that followed, I'm noticing that although she's not changing towards me, she's feeling like she's the big shot in the village, and I generally don't understand how she could be like that. I was the one who provided and paid for everything that we had, yet she's showing it off to people as if to say, I've got more than you, so you should look up to me and respect that. These were the first signs I was getting that she was that kind of person where status mattered to her so much. That was one of the things I liked least about Thailand, when people seemed to want to show off so much for things that were just so normal. We had a house and a car, but to her we didn't have a house and a car. We had a house and a car that was better than everyone else's in the village. So therefore, she owned the village and demanded respect. I hadn't seen this side of her before, and I guess I should have done, because it happened in Chiang Mai up and down the road close to where she worked. I'm starting to say, though, I'm annoying. It's getting me annoyed straight away, and it's starting to make me look at her like, calm down and live normally. She always had people coming to her when they needed help with things. People who wanted to borrow money would go to her because she would lend it. Yet when they didn't pay it back, of course I was the one losing. But for her it was like she was the one who lent them the money, and because they owed her money, she could tell everybody else in the village who owed money to her, and they could talk about this person in a negative way. These are things that are coming up more and more, and I'm starting to really get upset with her behaviour. Living within budget isn't really a problem. I find that straight away. The income I had was coming in was enough. But from time to time I'm spending a little bit here and there in order for her to be able to continue with this illusion that she's created around herself. She'd built a facade around herself as if she was the queen of the village. People came to her for help and she would sit there and listen to them and offer them advice. When I witnessed that for the first time, I absolutely blew my top. I picked up a lot of Thai, and although they weren't speaking in Thai with each other when I witnessed this, I didn't understand quite a few of the local words, but I did understand a lot. I loved learning languages, and learning that one was even more of a challenge, and I relished it. But the way that she sat opposite from this other lady who looked very dishevelled, she was just a farm worker. That's how my wife described her to me, and she was struggling with money. I heard my wife offering advice with regards to money. You shouldn't buy things you don't need. You don't need to do that. Why do you think you should have that? And I was so appalled that my wife thought that she had any right to offer advice to anybody. It seemed to be so different to what I would have ever done. And I did. I blew my top, like I said. I shouted at her in Thai, "Stop it. I've given enough. I've had enough of this behaviour. Just be a normal person. Stop thinking you're some kind of village queen. You're not." We then had a shouting match together, mainly in English, but I'm trying to say as much as possible in Thai so that this girl there can understand that my wife is nothing special more than her. She just happened to latch on to me, and that's why she's got everything. Not because she's a smart businesswoman like she seems to portray herself as being. I couldn't believe that she was acting like this, because I'd never expected that before. As I said, I guess I should have known when we had the car and she was driving around Chiang Mai down the road she used to work on, as if she had this sense of authority over people who hadn't yet managed to find a foreigner to give them this ability that she had. We quickly settled down and had a normal conversation, and I said, "I am really disliking the way you're behaving ever since we've had this house." I tried to get to the bottom of her opinions about things, about why she thought it was okay, and she just said she was trying to help people because she thought that she was in a position to. I tried asking her, "Why do you think you're in a position to offer all this advice to people? What have you done that has given you the ability to be able to try to alter people's lives by giving them advice that you don't know anything about?" She didn't like that. You could tell that she thought that she was something she wasn't. I just had to ignore it and get on with my day, but I just went out on the bicycle for quite a number of hours more than I usually would just to clear my head. It infuriated me the way that she was behaving. It was nothing wrong with the village. I loved it there. The people were fantastic and friendly, yet she became the sort of person that I spent my whole life trying to avoid. I noticed her child was behaving similarly towards their friends, learning from their mother, and that was a shocking sight to behold as well. Friends would come around and they would be instructed what they can and cannot do, as if they were entering the house of some dignified noble who had just returned from battle overseas. That's how I looked at it, and no matter what I tried to do, no matter what I said, she refused to alter her behaviour. It was ingrained in her in a way that what she had now meant that she was better than everyone else. And what did we have really? We had a normal car and a normal house. It just so happened to be in a village as opposed to next to all the other normal houses in the city only 20 minutes away. I didn't think I was anything special. I was a normal person. The house wasn't anything special. It was great and I loved it, but it wasn't a 15-bedroom mega mansion with 3 tennis courts and 6 swimming pools, and she wasn't driving around in a Ferrari one day and a Lamborghini the next. But she was acting as if she was doing even more than that, or as if she had more than that. And 3 months after I noticed this behaviour, I'm getting very close to the end of my rope. I'm begging her to stop acting like that, but she's really enjoying it, and I'm thinking, well, all this money that I've put into these things, if I was to leave, my retirement was going to be a lot worse than it was going to be otherwise. I could still exist in Thailand, I knew that, but it wouldn't be the same as it would have been before. And that was a struggle because I had to leave Bangkok for Chiang Mai in order to continue the same kind of lifestyle. Everything came to a head when I returned from a bicycle ride one day. I guess I came back earlier than she expected because she had a little area set up just outside the house where she was standing, and there were 3 women from the village sat on the floor in front of her, and she didn't notice that I returned, so I went as close as I could to listen in without anyone knowing I was there. And then I overhear her offering advice about what were the best crops to plant, what the best thing to do were when it came to harvesting them, the best techniques, and it was like she was some kind of boss of a farming cooperative who went round from village to village offering advice. Yet she'd never farmed a day in her life, and she had no idea what she was talking about. She just picked some things up on the internet and then thought she was amazing and starting trying to do that. It wasn't like she was trying to do it for a business where people were paying her money for advice. I would have half understood that. Well, maybe I wouldn't have really understood it, maybe a quarter understood it, because she wasn't making money. She was taking money from me. She was just doing it to try to be a big shot, and after listening in for 5 to 10 minutes, I just walked over and said, "I'm going to ask you one last time, stop this or I'm leaving." Instead of apologising for trying to be someone she wasn't, she started shouting at me saying, "These people need help." And then I said, "Maybe they do, but how do you think you're anyone who's able to give help to them?" Then she sort of gesticulated to the house and said, "Well, we have a nice house and car. I don't have to work and we have more money than them, so I think I can offer help to them that would be good for them." She didn't understand that she had no idea what she was saying to them or what she was offering in terms of advice. She just thought that she'd read a bit off the internet and she knew something about it, and the people had never heard of the internet in her mind, yet they all had phones, they all had the internet, and they all knew what they were doing. She just thought she knew better, even though she didn't. I'm not saying that it's wrong to give advice to people, but the way she did it was so condescending. The way she thought about herself was so different than how you might picture someone giving advice. It was as if she wasn't doing it to help these people. She was doing it to be one above them. That's what it felt like. Of course, she didn't stop. It was only about a month later when I decided I had enough and I couldn't take it anymore. Because we weren't legally married, that was one benefit. That made it a bit easier. The car was mine, so because she acted the way, she was losing the car. Things in the house I bought that were mine I took, the TV, the kettle, the toaster, everything I could put in the car. And when I'm actually loading the car, that was the first time she came to me and said she was so sorry she wouldn't do it again. She really didn't mean to hurt me and anger me, but I just had to look at her and said, "I gave you multiple warnings and chances. I absolutely hate the way you behaved." I told her I'd spent my whole life trying to avoid people exactly like you, and you didn't listen. I told her I had to come to terms with the fact that I put so much money into this area, into this house, that my life is never going to be the same again because of her. I tried my best, but it wasn't going to work, because you became everything I've always hated. I explained to her one last time, you are nothing special, you are just the same as everybody else, apart from you found a stupid idiot like me to build a house. That's all. You're not a big shot. Please understand. I told her I was leaving and she tried her best to stop me, but I wasn't about to. She begged me, but what would change? She'd get back to her old ways because it was as if that was who she really wanted to be. I got in the car and she just said, "Come back soon, I miss you," as if she thought I would, and I left the village in the car with all my stuff. The realization that I'd spent over half my retirement investments and my income was going to be around $800 a month from now on. Enough to live on, but not enough to have any sort of a good time. The first thing I did was drive to Bangkok and sell the car immediately. That gave me $30,000. I transferred it home and topped up the investments, and that added a couple of $100 extra to my income every month. So I was on about $1,000. From there, I spent a few days in a hotel deciding where I wanted to go. The thought of returning to Chiang Mai sickened me because it would remind me of her and how she started out as being a dream and how she turned into a nightmare. What I'd given her made her turn into that, and you wouldn't have thought about it, but it did. I knew I couldn't stay in Bangkok. It was possible to live there on that amount of money, but it wouldn't have been a life. So I got a bus down south to Hua Hin, a place I'd heard about but never been before. And that's where I stayed. I found a place to rent and started living there. Life was okay, but I couldn't really do much of anything on $1,000 a month. After I paid for my health insurance and my rent and visa, there wasn't much left. I could go out for one nice meal a month maybe. Other than that, I was just existing, and I lasted for a number of years. I ultimately decided to return to the UK, where I'd worked before for years. I only had an Irish passport, I was still only Irish, but I just thought the UK was the better option for me because I knew it so much more. I'd avoided falling in love with someone for years, and now it had cost me a good retirement. I was able to get more money in England, and I live a boring existence. I'm around 70 years old now, just over, and sometimes I really do wish I was still in Thailand, but other times I don't mind. It was going to be a great retirement in that house if only she had not become that person. It's not like she tried to scam me out of any money, it's not like she did anything other than be the sort of person that I didn't want to even know. But I did build a house, I did lose a lot of money, and because of that I couldn't maintain an acceptable lifestyle in Thailand, so I had to leave. I suppose the moral of my story is, don't lose sight of what you want to do. I lost sight of what I wanted to do, which was live in Thailand, because I put my future in the hands of someone who I loved so much, yet who I didn't really know well enough to do what I did. I had no idea that she would do what she did, and if I did, I wouldn't have done what I did. But I suppose I was lucky that I didn't lose everything like many people do. Or is that just me trying to take comfort? The only comfort I can take out of such a bad and shocking experience.